What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? What a night. That was football. The Vikings beat the Bears, and the Atlanta Falcons, which I thought was the worst game in the history of games to be on primetime, turned out to be a pretty riveting last couple minutes. Hold on for dear life in Las Vegas in what looked to be a half-empty crowd with Mark Davis looking on with his gorgeous girlfriend. That's love. Mark Davis, beautiful young girlfriend, watching his team now is 2-12 and have a lot of issues. So we will try to figure out everything that's going on. A lot else that's going on in the NFL as well. Patrick Mahomes, serious leg injury or ankle injury, as week to week. There's potential of him not just missing Saturday's game, but then Christmas's game. Why I think, one, we'll dive into Wentz, but it could be actually a good thing for Netflix to see the power of the NFL, and I'll tell you why. We talk a lot about guys like Mike Tomlin and Dan Campbell and some of the leaders. Is there a guy in the league that doesn't get as much credit that probably should when it comes to leadership and adversity? So we'll talk about some other football stuff away from just this awesome Monday Night Football. Tonight was a night where I felt I'm honored to do this for a living. I get to watch Caleb Williams get destroyed. I get to watch Desmond Ridder and Kirk Cousins' corpse. Luckily, all you did too, because it's the NFL and millions of people consume this product, even when it's really bad. But before we dive into some football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app. I went for a walk with the dog. Took my beautiful fiance, and we're walking. We're taking in some air before the game started, and we're trying to figure out we need some presents. We are late to the party here. We need to take care of some people. What are we going to do? I got the perfect present. I'm sure a lot of you guys are in that position. Do you want to get tickets to a game? Do you want to get tickets to a concert? Do you want to get tickets to a comedy show? Do you want to have something under the tree that's going to put a smile on that loved one's face? Be like, oh, thank you so much. You got me my favorite whoever concert ticket for March. Or you got me the national championship in college football. You got me playoff Packer tickets, whatever you want. Any venue, any team, anywhere. The app doesn't get any easier to use, so take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code JOHN, that's John, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Where do we start? I want to take a big picture view, 20,000 feet, like one of those drones right now flying over New Jersey, on what we witnessed tonight. Because one thing as these games were going on, I'm like, what am I going to talk about? The Bears' dysfunction, the Raiders' quarterback issues, the Atlanta Falcons honestly being one of the bigger disappointments in the NFL. And then I realized, do you know what was really evident as tonight went on? Ownership. Well-run franchise. And there was one of them playing tonight, and that was the Minnesota Vikings. And I was thinking, we're all praying and hope Randy Moss gets well. Obviously, the situation that has played out from like within the last month when his eyes were discolored on TV, and then he had to step away, and now he's battling cancer. He said he mossed it. So we're all rooting for Randy, who is one of the most electric athletes of my lifetime, and reminds me when I fell in love with football in the mid to late 90s, obviously when he hit the scene and played for the Minnesota Vikings with Chris Carter on really good teams. And then the Vikings were good in the 2000s. Then they were good in the 2010s. And now they're good again. You know why? They're just always kind of good. Doesn't mean they're always winning Super Bowls. Doesn't even mean they're always winning the division. But it just feels like they're a well-run franchise. Starts at the top. Starts with ownership. Starts with hiring the right people. Starts with drafting and developing good players. And then you see these other franchises and you go, what the bleep is going on? Let's start with the Chicago Bears. They are a joke. Like they truly are. and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse on this, but I honestly thought probably within 10 minutes of actual play in that game, there wasn't any chance, like literally no chance, the Minnesota Vikings weren't winning that game. I didn't know, just like all of you, what the final score would be. Would it be 13-0? Would it be 40-0? Would it be 20-7? But there was zero chance the Bears were even going to sniff a competitive performance, let alone the ability to win that game. And as it played out, it actually got worse and worse. Same thing watching the Raiders and the Falcons. You're like, what is going on? This is awful. And I think when you start with the Bears, and I think these other two teams we'll get to in a second, is like they are a franchise that's been owned by the same family for 100 plus years right now. It's pretty clear. Virginia, who's 100 plus years old, her son George, they have no clue what they're doing. Ryan Poles, the video shots on Monday Night Football of him as Troy and Joe, and listen, they're in a tough spot. They're not podcasters. They're essentially league partners. So they're not going to shit on the organization, act like it's not a good job. But when they say it is a fantastic job and Ryan Poles deserves to keep his job, like it's easy for them to say. Is it necessarily true? I don't know. Because Ryan Poles drafted a quarterback and gave him an offensive line that is beyond atrocious. He plays in a cold weather city where his big rival, the Packers, I know it's a one-sided rivalry, plays in a place called the Frozen Tundra and drafted a wide receiver at 9 when there were countless offensive linemen on the board. He is an offensive lineman. He literally protected and was Matt Ryan's roommate, who pretty clearly made the Atlanta Falcons for 15 plus years. Because you remove him, they're a joke. But you look at the Bears, you go, the only sense of hope you could have as a fan, because you know, like, we're never going to be the Minnesota Vikings with the McCaskies. We're never going to be the Green Bay Packers with the McCaskies. Hell, we're not even the Ford family now that they have competent leadership. We are screwed. We just have to pray because your quarterback looks atrocious, looks completely overmanned. And I said this going on, the last couple weeks. They're always down like 15-0 at halftime, 20-0 at halftime, 16-0 at halftime, 24-0. Like the game's over at halftime. Every single game they play. And then late in the game, he'll score a bunch of points. It's like, oh, Caleb Williams coming on. Nothing mattered. It's like the defenses no longer matter. You're no longer going up against a scheme defense when the game's on the line. They're basically calling off the dogs, playing prevent defense. I think you got to keep your fingers crossed and hope it's like a Jared Goff, LA Rams situation back before McVay got there. And just go, our coaching and our people running this football team right now, in terms of around the players, are so incompetent that if we just get the right person, which is probably not going to happen, but if we did, look at the Rams, they got McVay and everything changed. Because if you do not, you keep saying, well, let's go get Mike Vrabel. Even Troy, like, go trade for Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan would quit football before he worked for that operation. I promise you that. I promise you that. And I also got news for you. Listen, like, he likes the Brock Purdy types a lot more than a guy that holds the ball and doesn't see anything. Because right now, Caleb Williams is seeing ghosts. He's not a very good player at all. Now, his coaching staff is, an embarrassment. It could go down, if you look at the aggregate on the season, starting with Eberflus, as the worst coaching staff in the league. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you got Kevin O'Connell, who's now just known as the quarterback whisperer. You got Brian Flores, who's not very nice to Tua, but undeniable, one of the best defensive coaches in the league. At home, Minnesota, I think, can go toe-to-toe with any team in terms of home field advantage. It looked like Penn State whiteout. That place is going nuts. You're like, this is going to be a tough spot for Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams, and it was. They were overwhelmed. They couldn't move the ball. It was a joke. But, that's what the organization has been. And now you're going to this offseason. When they hired Kevin O'Connell, before that, they had Mike Zimmer. Before that, they've had guys like Brian Billick. They've had they've had real guys from real places. And then all of a sudden you put Eberflus and Shane Waldron's. What did you guys expect to put the quarterback in that situation? And I think Minnesota, Green Bay, and now, ironically, Detroit, because they were always like that as well. But now they're kind of in that class, at least for the last couple of years. We'll see if they can sustain it over a long period of time. You're very lucky that you're in that team's division because you're going to keep beating them. It's like Andy Reid has benefited from just having the Raiders around because most years he's getting 2 victories. Now, Sean Payton, he's going to benefit. Most years he's going to get 2 victories. Jim Harbaugh, he's going to benefit. Most years he's going to get 2 victories. Why? Because the organization has no clue what they're doing. And just because you get a sexy player that Mel Kiper or someone puts high on the big board, none of that means a goddamn thing because it doesn't translate into anything. But it's the opposite with good teams, right? When the Vikings get Justin Jefferson, he immediately maximizes his skills. When they get Darisaw, he immediately maximizes his skill. They draft Jordan Addison, he immediately maximizes his skills. Harrison Smith, Kendricks forever, Daniil Hunter, like all the guys they've had over the last 7, 8, 9 years, including the crop of guys they have now, maximize their skills. Look at Sam Darnold. Comes there, maximizes his skills. And he's a very skilled guy. Now, big picture for them, I think I'd be pretty concerned. It's very difficult to go far because, listen, Darnold can be a little hit or miss. And tonight he was a little all over the place. He's missing a star left tackle, and then his right tackle goes out. How are you going anywhere with missing your 2 tackles? Especially when one's an all-pro, Pro Bowl level guy, and the other guy's a solid starter. Like, when you play the better teams, you're going to be running around for your life. Now, luckily, Sam is a good athlete and can move, got an explosive arm, can throw on the run. But that is something to watch because they clearly are very well-coached defense. And offensively, from a, Arsenal standpoint, the weapons they have, I mean, they got the one of him and Chase are the 2 best receivers. Addison's an incredible number 2. Tight end's back and healthy now. Aaron Jones is a stud. Darnold's a really good player. It's like offensively, if they were healthy, they would be a problem. I think they could make serious noise in the playoffs. We'll have to find out what O'Neill's injury, the right tackle's injury is, but if he's out for a foreseeable future, like I'm sorry, I'm just out on their ceiling in the playoffs. But like their culture spoke this year because they lost their left tackle a while ago and they haven't skipped a beat. So that's a well-run organization. The Bears are the opposite. Just like when you look, like the Falcons are in shambles. Why? Because their quarterback is shot. Well, they just gave the guy $100 million. Well, where did he come from? The Vikings, who said, no mas, we're done. We're good. See you later. When I talk about there are 4 teams tonight, 1 team well run, the others are a joke. I think the Falcons are an embarrassment. I know they're 7-7. I think they stink. I mean, I really think they are bad. And part of it falls on the shoulders of the quarterback, who is a sitting duck. He's never been able to move, but clearly now after the injury is just stagnant. And tonight, and as Orlovsky and Lewis were talking about on the broadcast, his confidence is shot. I mean, he's lost out there. He is swimming. And they got bailed out on that call when the linebacker blocks, the ball, which was a great defensive call by Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, never had a shot with him coming right up the middle, and they called a roughing the passer, which is it's just not the right call. You just cannot call that pass. But you watch Cousins play, like he's just a bad player right now. Like he's a really bad player. You watch Caleb Williams, he's a really bad player right now. I can't even judge. I'll be honest, I haven't watched that much of the Raiders this year, mainly because they've been an unwatchable product. But you can't even, they're rolling out Desmond Ridder, who actually, had some moments tonight. But they probably, we're critical of the quarterback situations in Chicago and Minnesota. The Raiders have literally the worst quarterback situation in the league because, like, Will Levis is obviously pretty bad. Brian Callahan, inherited him and they just rolled it out to probably tank this year. The 3 quarterback situation from Gardner Minshew, who was a backup, Aiden O'Connell, who's probably a 3rd stringer, and now Ridder, who's, probably a 3rd stringer as well. Even if your team was loaded, obviously Max Crosby has, ankle surgery. He's their best player by a mile, but you got no shot. And that organization, like a little like Mark Davis, when it comes to the Bears, a family-owned business who's owned the business for what, 60, 70 years. Now, Mark, unlike the Bears, landed a new stadium, and it brought a lot of hoopla and it brought a lot of hype, and they've been really bad because they're always changing over. They never have any consistency. And Rap Sheet reported that, and listen, I've said before, like Tom Brady should be involved, but Rap Sheet reports like he's going to be heavily involved in picking the quarterback. Well, it's like, what's Telesco's job? What if Telesco disagrees with his evaluation? In fairness, Tom Brady's never evaluated a player in the draft. And is Telesco stay? Does he get fired? Does Antonio Pierce get fired? Does Tom Brady want him gone? In fairness to Telesco, he did draft Justin Herbert and was there for a long period of time with Phillip Rivers. So it's like, is that going to work? Why don't they just name Tom Brady the president of operations like John Elway? The problem is he can't do that job and call games. So it's like Antonio Pierce, who last week Mark Davis basically refused to support. Don't blame him. I wouldn't either. But why'd you hire him in the first place? Because Devontae Adams was begging for him. Well, I'm watching today, 90% through the game. It's like the Raiders wide receivers don't have a catch in the game. You're like, well, they did trade a first-round pick a couple years ago for Devontae Adams, who's now gone, who just had 200 yards for it with Aaron Rodgers. It's like that's just dysfunction after dysfunction after dysfunction. And you watch the Falcons, who, unlike the McCaskies and Mark Davis and Al Davis, right, who the families have owned it forever, this guy is super rich. He just, when you see Arthur Blank, he just looks like money. Like that's what money looks like when you see Arthur Blank. Yet it's pretty clear you remove Matty Ice from that organization, they're no different than the Bears or the Raiders. I mean, they got desperate. They signed a guy coming off a torn Achilles who's been a very polar. It's not like they just signed Peyton Manning off the neck injury. It's like, well, even if this doesn't work, we're still signing Peyton freaking Manning or Jason Light. It's like, yeah, Belichick thinks Brady shot, but he's still Tom freaking Brady. It's like, yeah, he's Kirk Cousins. And you watch Kirk Cousins tonight, you go, I'd want no part of that guy. But your team's not that good because you used a first-round pick number 8, on a quarterback that maybe you're going to need to replace Cousins with, but then Cousins has a no-trade clause, and he makes so much goddamn money, like who's going to trade for him? The organization just looks lost. And who's going to end up winning the South? Oh, Tampa Bay. Well, why is that? Well, they just have a well-run organization. Like Jason Light just kind of knows what he's doing. And you just watch Tampa play and you watch Atlanta play, and they couldn't be any more opposite. Now, the one thing good if you're Atlanta, and I'm a Michael Penix guy, you just hope he's a good player. And I think he's going to be a good player. I'd be excited to watch him play. I would make the move right now. Even Orlovsky had a good point when it's like, should we throw for it on third down? That was the play where they called roughing the passer. They're like, listen, if you're going to catch Tampa, you need to have confidence in Kirk Cousins. So if you won't throw it now, you might as well just punt on the playoffs. And I agree. Like, if you can't trust this guy that you're paying, you just gave $90, $100 million guaranteed, you might as well just 1, 2, 3 Cancun now. But you got no shot if that's the quarterback play you're going to get. And I'm not acting like I know Michael Penix is ready today. Maybe he needed the year, but you got no shot with that. None. Not with the way Baker and that offense is playing right now. I mean, they just went on the road, played the Chargers, who have a good defense, and eviscerated them. And Baker might as well be John Elway meets Joe Montana compared to Kirk Cousins. But this gets back to the organization. It just feels like they got no clue what they're doing. Raiders got no clue what they're doing. They got no quarterback. Their coaches, in flux, as it always is. And we had one team that's just well run. They didn't even play that well tonight, and they kicked the shit out of the Bears. And they're just going to head for 13 or 14 wins. 13 or 14 wins. Something the Bears, the Falcons, and the Raiders could not dream. Honestly, there's a chance. I guess the Falcons still play the Panthers, and I think they play maybe the Saints. They have a pretty easy schedule coming in, and Washington's one of their games. So let's say let's give them 9 wins. The Raiders win 2 games. That would be 11. The Bears win 4. That would be 15. I was going to say, do all 3 of those teams win total add up to the Vikings? And it probably will at the end of the day, but it'll be close. I think what's sad on a serious note is how awesome. If you're 12-2, you are having a freaking incredible season. Like you could go 10 years, you could win some Super Bowls and just might not have 12-2 starts. So what the Vikings and what the Lions have accomplished is awesome. But there are some injuries you just don't overcome. The Lions have kind of hit that point with the amount they have. I do think with the Vikings, like if you are out your two starting tackles, that is just a position where they're just your backups in the NFL. There's a wide gap. Like there are just players that you have. Like there is no replacing that. And then there's a domino effect when you lose another position. It's like, listen, you have a stud guard like a Zach Martin or something. You lose him, that hurts. But then once you lose the other guard, then you're mixing and matching with your backups. So you're like plugging this hole to plug this hole, and you're getting leaks. It's just it's impossible to function. And it sucks because Kevin O'Connell has done a badass job coaching this team. And it's been really, really fun to watch. And it's been really cool to watch the resurrection of Sam Darnold. Just seems like a good, high-character guy with big-time skills. I mean, you watch him sling that pill around tonight, and the difference of him and Caleb Williams is one guy is playing confident. It's not like Caleb Williams is throwing to me and you. Like, Keenan Allen's pretty freaking good. That catch he had on the sideline where he went Chris Carter was badass. Rome was a top 10 pick. DJ Moore's one of the highest paid players in the history of the Bears organization. And you watch Darnold with a couple good wide receivers, just looks like a Pro Bowler. He is going to the Pro Bowl this year. That's why the conversation just continues to get, pretty difficult to have when it comes to his offseason. Now, I do think the Daniel Jones thing, maybe it's a contingency plan. Like, I'm sure they haven't made up their mind, but I'd have a hard time letting that go. I really would. Now, I think they love J.J. McCarthy, and if his health is looking good, and I would say right around free agency, that they probably will just let Sam Darnold go. And I think Sam Darnold should be very smart because, as we talked about tonight, you go to the Raiders, you go to the Falcons, you go to teams like the Bears, you lose, and your career becomes ruined really, really fast at quarterback. Like, that's what happens. And I know Shador and the Sanders family is begging to go to the Raiders. And listen, it's sad because, the Raiders and the Bears, these are historic brands in the NFL. And they are borderline unwatchable. It's weird. I've watched so much Chicago Bears this year. I might as well, I feel like a Bears fan, the amount of snaps I've watched them play. And all their games look the same. They're just so terrible to begin the game. Their offense has no rhythm. Their quarterback's completely overwhelmed. Tonight they try to run some easy plays, get some quick screens to DJ Moore, but they can't run the ball because their offensive line's awful. So it takes like Swift making plays like he's Saquon Barkley, busting runs, making a guy miss, getting outside. But there's nothing easy. Nothing is. You watch the Vikings, like they're just some easy completions, easy yards. You watch Atlanta and the Raiders, it's like pulling teeth to get 5 yards. Kevin O'Connell can scheme up a 15-yard play with his eyes closed and taking a nap on the sideline. All three, the other three teams are like begging to be in like 2nd and 5. It's crazy. The NFL, man, I remember saying it when I went to the Combine. It's really 10-ish teams competing against everyone else. These other teams just have no shot. None. No one knows what they're doing. Everyone's worried they're going to get fired. There's no stability. Even when people do get jobs, they don't know what coaches to hire. Maybe they don't even have the juice to hire the coaches because the owner doesn't listen to them. It's all fucked up. And most of us, right? I'd say all of us listening, aren't, I guess we have some people in the NFL listening to this, but the ones that I know of are all on good teams that, we don't get to go into these organizations, but it's pretty clear. You just watch their teams play and you just go, yeah, something's really off. Like this is not normal. This is not normal. And that's what we got on Monday Night Football. It's the most wonderful time of year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at the DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the season of giving, and we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. When you bet, just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Okay, let's dive into a little news and notes around the National Football League. Let's start with the two-time defending, almost said national champs. They say world champs, but this sport's played in America, so American champs, but Super Bowl champs, the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes has a high ankle sprain and is week to week. Now, in the grand scheme of things, when you're 12-1 and you have a multiple game lead on the Buffalo Bills, who have a very, very easy ending to their schedule, Patriots, Jets, Patriots. So I think you have to assume they're going to run the table. If you're the Chiefs, you just have to win 2 of your next 3 games. The main problem is the Chiefs play 2 games the next 9 days. Obviously, they play on Christmas, which is a Wednesday, and they play this Saturday. So I think as we sit here today, it's fair to assume Mahomes out this weekend, Carson Wentz playing. I think there's 2 angles to this. There's a football angle, and there's a business angle. And I think from the football angle, if you were sitting down over a plate of barbecue with Coach Reed and Veach right now, they could give you an educated guess, but they wouldn't truly know, just like none of us truly know what the hell Carson Wentz is going to look like playing for them. He is nowhere near the athlete that he once was after some of the injuries. He still has a big arm. He started 1 game in the last 2 years. Obviously, he's been a backup last year for the Rams and this year for the Chiefs. His start last year came the last game of the season when they were playing the Niners, and the Niners rested everybody. So it was basically like a preseason game. Now, he did throw 2 touchdowns. He actually made some nice throws, and then he parlayed that into the backup job for Mahomes. But for me to go like he's going to look excellent relative to a backup quarterback, he's going to look awful like the dude we saw last night, Sam Howell for the Seattle Seahawks, I don't know. I have no freaking clue. I would say that this game with Carson Wentz against the Texans at home is much more winnable than a short week on the road at Pittsburgh, who looks like they've avoided a injury with TJ Watt, and he's technically available this Saturday. And I think it's fair to assume that he's going to play on Wednesday. And they got multiple other pass rushers. And right now, the Chiefs' offensive line, especially on the edges, is struggling. Well, where do the Pittsburgh Steelers light you up? Edge pressure. So not a great matchup to put out Mahomes injured with an ankle. I think if you're taking an educated guess right now, you do not see Mahomes in the next 2 games because neither of them are must win, right? But I think from a business standpoint, it was a big deal for the NFL to get into business with Netflix. They're a fucking powerhouse company with a ton of money. And when this new deal comes up, they are going to be players. And clearly they wanted the Chiefs, and the NFL gave them the Chiefs for a reason. It's been widely reported when it comes to television ratings, they have surpassed the Cowboys. Now, part of it is they've been the best team. They got the most famous player. They're playing in all the big games, and the NFL is such a behemoth cash cow right now. They're doing enormous ratings, but their games this year are outrating Cowboy games, which is obviously a big deal. It means you're the king of the castle right now. I'd argue whether Mahomes plays or not, it's not that big a deal when it comes to the viewership. And honestly, I think it's probably a good thing if he does. And I'm talking from the business standpoint of the NFL league office and the partners and the ownership in terms of what they want to sell it for. And the more they sell it for, the more the players benefit too, because they're in a revenue sharing agreement. Because if Carson Wentz plays, if me or you played, millions of people are going to watch. We cannot say that about the other sports. If you put a big baseball game on Netflix or you put a big basketball game on Netflix regular season, guess what? The streaming numbers would be jarring to the company because not that many people would stream it. Yet when it comes to football, specifically on a holiday, I think it's almost, in terms of like rating-wise, recession-proof. I don't think it matters. And I think it will be really impressive for the people on the Netflix side to be like, wait, 16 million people watch this, even though Patrick Mahomes was on the sideline in sweats? Because that's what and maybe I'm lowballing it. Maybe it's 25 million. It's fucking Christmas. Literally everyone's at home. And every human being that I know has Netflix. So I would expect for the NFL. It's not ideal to have your biggest star injured. The best part about football, we never worry about load management. This isn't baseball where you got to give a guy a week off. If you miss games, he's clearly hurt. Otherwise, guys play injured all the time, right? His ankle, he got rolled up on. No one's even like, well, maybe they're pushing. No, if he was healthy, he would play. That's the way football works. You only get 17 shots to play games on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, maybe some Saturdays, and now Wednesdays. I think, and the Chiefs played on every day of the week this year. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The only day they skipped is Tuesday. And I'm pretty sure the NFL did not have a game on Tuesday. But I do believe that whether Mahomes plays or not, so many people are going to watch this freaking game. And I think it would be an enlightening experience for Netflix to go, wow, you're telling me the most famous player in the biggest sport was injured and this many people still watched? I think it would ultimately be a good thing for the business of football. What else did I want to hit on? The Lions, and we talked about this on Sunday night. It was reported today that David Montgomery is having knee surgery and he's out for the season. And I really feel bad because this season, clearly when they were healthy early in the year, I mean, they were a big time squad. I mean, they kind of had it all. Were they a perfect team? No. But I mean, their really only knock on offense is like, yeah, their quarterback's not mobile, but it's like on any given game, he can throw 4 or 5 touchdowns. Their running game was elite. Their offensive line was elite. They had a deep wide receiver. They had a slot wide receiver. They had guys that could run over the middle. They had an awesome tight end. They were literally a complete offense. And defensively, they were vastly improved from last year. They doubled down on the secondary. They bought Davis. They drafted Arnold from Bama. It's like they did everything you could ask. Hutchinson was taking a huge step, and now all these guys are injured. And I just think, early in the season, I didn't think it was hyperbolic to go. I think it's one of the better 1-2 combinations in recent memory, and probably one of the better 1-2 combinations at running back I've seen in my life. And part of that is compared, you have to put it into context of the offensive line they're working with, which was easily one of the better ones in the NFL, especially from a run blocking standpoint. It was like you could not stop this running game. And I think the thing they had is Montgomery was such a physical back. He was so good in the red area. Then you had this hybrid guy who actually is still a very physical runner, but he was so good in space, such a great catcher of the football. And to lose Montgomery to go along with losing their stud defensive line, McNeil, who's a good player. They've lost multiple. It just it doesn't feel over. Like they're obviously still going to make the playoffs, but like, are they going to be able to even win the division? And I think this is a good lesson. And it showed last year why I was so critical of them kicking the field goal. You didn't have the Niners on the ropes. You were about to give them a Mike Tyson uppercut to the jaw in 1989. You kick the field goal, you basically knocked them out. They would have been in major trouble. But they went for it on 4th down. It flipped. The Niners drive and score, and it flips the game. And I say the same thing about the Niners. Like, they've had 2 fourth-quarter leads in the Super Bowl against Andy Reid and Mahomes. And they weren't able to close the deal on either. There is no guarantee that Shanahan, Purdy, and this crew will ever get to another Super Bowl, let alone if they did have a fucking lead in the second half. And you only get so many opportunities, whatever you do in life. But when you get massive, big opportunities in whatever profession you're in, even quote unquote, when you're not ready, because most people last year thought, well, the Lions aren't quite ready. You've got to take advantage of them because you never know when they're going to come back. You know what it turns out when the Chiefs had that crazy comeback in 2019 to win the Super Bowl against the Niners? It felt like, oh, finally Andy got over the hook. His career's made, right? And now you look back, it's like, yeah, they're just kind of the beginning, right? But now you look back at the Niners, you're like, they got a big offseason incoming. And now you look back at the Lions and you go, hard to have a better 2-year stretch than they just had. They were just in the NFC Championship game. And a couple weeks ago, before these injuries really got out of control, it felt like they were locked to be the number 1 seed. And now all of a sudden we're looking like, could they end up the 5 seed? Now, luckily you would get I was going to say the Atlanta Falcons. I'm recording this before the Monday night part of the games. But probably Tampa, like that's no shoe-in win. Tampa beat Detroit. I saw Tampa's 2 wins are against 2 teams that have 4 total losses. Philly or two of their wins, right, are Philly and in Detroit. So when you get these opportunities and you are excelling in them, you got to finish the deal. And sometimes you look back, like there was nothing Dan Campbell or the Lions could have done to prevent this. These guys are getting injured in games, and it just feels like a weekly occurrence now, and they just cannot slow up the bleeding. So, in a weird way, I feel bad for the Lions in terms of this is the way their season is kind of going toward the end because it almost feels unfair. But I think you could look back last year and go, last year was as good of a shot as any. I mean, you get into the Super Bowl with the way your team was playing, you're a pretty bad matchup for Kansas City. Hell, you'd already beat them that year. And I saw Dan Campbell say he regretted kicking the onside kick. Like, I think he's in a tough position right now with his defense. Obviously, he wouldn't have kicked the defense or the onside kick if his defense was healthy. Now, I would imagine too, like the course of the game, he probably hasn't give up 38 points going into the fourth quarter if his defense is healthy. So it's just they're just in a tough spot, and there's not much you can do about it. Uh, One other thing is that Mike Tomlin, gets a lot of credit and rightfully so for being this exceptional leader. And anytime you hear Tomlin talk, anytime you see Tomlin in some of these NFL film clips, anytime you see Tomlin in Hard Knocks, the AFC North Hard Knocks, you just see the way some of his troubled players when they leave Pittsburgh, how their careers unravel. Le'Veon Bell's career unraveled when he left Pittsburgh. Antonio Brown, I mean, it couldn't have gone any worse. They trade Deontay Johnson. 2 years later, the Ravens are like, I know they didn't technically trade him to the Ravens, but indirectly they kind of did. And they're like, get out of our building. Go home. We don't want to look at you. It's remarkable. Mike Tomlin was made for like the 70s when there were no rules. And it was like, these guys just you kind of got to corral them. You got to let them be. But then once they get in the building, you got to, drive a hard ship. It's like he could have thrived in any era. I think we don't talk enough about Sean McVay under these circumstances because anyone can have success in sports and life when things are going well, right? Anyone can make money in the stock market when it's like historic highs. Like, yeah, welcome to the club. What about when it's 20% down in a year? Are you making money? Right? What about when your team's 1-4, like the Rams were early this season? You have injuries everywhere. Does the season just get away from you? Does your franchise just unravel? And all of a sudden you're looking up and you're a 5-win team at the end of the year and you're drafted ninth? Or like, are you looking up and going, yeah, we got a pretty good chance to win 10, 11 games and win the division? That's what the Rams did. Last year, they were 3-6. Somehow when the dust settled, they were 10-7 and going toe to toe as the 7 seed with the Detroit Lions and probably, had a very, very good chance to win that game. Sean McVay is an unbelievable leader. And we know what he looks like when times are good, right? When his team is stacked, loaded top to bottom, like he can compete to win a Super Bowl. He can win a Super Bowl. But what about when his team is going through a rebuild and he's dependent on young guys everywhere? And Cooper Kupp is nowhere near the same player. And he's got offensive linemen in and out of the lineup. How does he do when shit hits the fan? This is why I'm glad that he turned down millions upon millions of dollars for Amazon. Because he has an incredible life skill, and it's to coach football. And I think about this a lot with Kyle Shanahan. Like, I've seen Kyle when his team's healthy and it's good. He can kick the shit out of most people, beside Andy Reid. He can win games when he really has to in the playoffs, on the road or at home. But what about when the wheels fall off? Like right now, they're 6-8, and they got 3 games left. The Dolphins at Miami, then Detroit and Arizona. Can he win one of those games? Can he win all 3 of them? Does he end up going 7-10? Or like, do you look up and you go, that's the worst Kyle Shanahan coach team ever, and they're still 9-8? Because I'm seeing it with McVay right now. These last 2 years, easily. If I give them the majority of coaches, none of the top guys, like the bottom 15 coaches, and I put them in that situation where they're 1-4 or 3-6, there is zero chance any of them make the playoffs. Because it's twofold. It's, I got to keep the team, the spirits high. I got to keep everyone's head up. but I also got to keep everyone focused, out scheme the opponent, and have good weeks of practice from a schematic standpoint on a weekly basis. So it's twofold. It's leadership, it's lifting guys up and coaching guys up to get these wins. And we have no margin for error. Like, we don't need a win or two. We got to go 7-1 down the stretch, as they did last year after starting 3-6. This year after 1-4. Like, you're 5 games in and you have one win, and all of a sudden you're looking and you go, God, we got 12 games left. Can we go, I don't know, 10-2 down the stretch? That's essentially what he would be doing if he's able to win out and win 11 games. So Sean McVay is kind of putting on a clinic these last 2 years. Are they going to win the Super Bowl? Probably not. Are they going to win a playoff game? Who knows? But I am so impressed. I think all eyes, I know for me and a lot of people in my life, it's like, okay, Kyle. Because right now, it's not like if they lose out, they're putting themselves in great position for a draft pick if you're the 49ers. I looked yesterday, they were drafting 15th. They're having the worst season that I can remember in a long time. Everyone thinks the franchise is in shambles, and they're drafting 15th. So even if they lose out, there's so many shitty teams in the league. It's like, okay, you're drafting 10th. As all my buddies that are college scouts say, this is one of the worst drafts in recent memory at the top. There are a couple high-end players, but this is not littered with Jamar Chases and Micah Parsons and those type players. Penei Sewells. This is not viewed as a super high. The buzz I get, there's not going to be that much difference drafting 16th as drafting 6th. In some years, that is a dramatic, drastic change. Not this year. So, like, to me, Kyle, anything less than winning 2 of these last 3 games would be pretty embarrassing for the guy. Other than that, football, baby. It goes by way too fast. Well, one story I saw today, which would be crazy, and I kind of have a theory that, yeah, we'll see if this ends up coming to fruition by the time you're listening to this. Maybe it has. And maybe he's just using this to try to get another team to offer him more money. Is that Michael Vick is in serious discussions with Sacramento State to be their next head coach, and which would be beyond shocking. Now, he has no connections there. Pretty sure he's never really played on the West Coast. Moved to Sacramento, which I do think he would like. I mean, it's a booming city in California. A lot of money behind the program. They've recently got $50+ million, committed over several years for NIL. They want to, upgrade to like the Mountain West, so to play Division I football. I do wonder if a guy like Michael Vick, and you see some of these players that you would be stunned, like Hines Ward right now is a position coach for Arizona State. If you watched Hines Ward play, you'd be like, yeah, I could see him being a coach one day, right? And sometimes you never know. Guys that you thought would be coaches don't become coaches, and guys that you thought would never become coaches become coaches. So it's hard when they're playing to truly know. But I wonder if Michael Vick looks at Deion Sanders and says, man, you can make millions of dollars, still be a star, use your stardom to help build up the program, hire good assistant coaches. He played for some pretty good coaches. I mean, spent some time around Andy Reid, played for Mike Tomlin. From a motivational standpoint, guys loved Michael Vick. He was a good leader. And obviously, you're not going to make millions of dollars at Sacramento State, but if like that is your entry point to ultimately get the Colorado job or the Virginia Tech job or the Auburn job or whatever in the future where they do pay a premium. And, at the end of Michael Vick's career, he was a backup quarterback. So it's not like when he retired, he was making $20-30 million. You go, wait, I could make millions of dollars, give back to the game that made me a star, made me all this money, uh, and gave me an opportunity. I mean, for him in life, when I was around him, it was a second chance on life. Andy Reid, Jeffrey Lurie, like it was pretty controversial. It was the year before I got there, but when they first signed him, it was pretty controversial at the time. When I got there, it wasn't a big deal. Like he was just kind of on the team by training camp. You're like, are we sure this guy's not better than Kevin Cobb? And obviously Kevin Cobb got injured. Michael Vick came in. The rest is history. But I think that would be pretty cool. And I always think it's cool when these former players get involved. Like you watch Peyton Manning. I had a buddy on executive on a team that texts me. He's like, "How cool is it watching Belichick and Peyton Manning?" He's like, "Peyton Manning, this guy's a fucking genius." Sometimes, and I get it, he's so rich and he's involved in a lot of different businesses, but you can't tell me like if you're Jim Irsay, you wouldn't just look around. It's like, should we just fire everybody and like give Peyton Manning $25 million a year? And who knows? Maybe Peyton's has so much money now it's not even worth it for him to do it. But like the knowledge he has and his passion and love of football, like Tom Brady obviously is involved with the Raiders for financial means, like it's a good investment, but he should be involved in football. I give Tom credit. He feels I don't notice him as much watching these games. I know it's unfair to compare him to Romo or these guys. I don't think he's as good as like Tony Romo, but he is definitely a much easier listen as the season has gone on. But he deserves to be, and he should be for us, the consumer, involved in football. And if you're a player, like you would love to be part of a team where Peyton Manning or Tom Brady are there. So you can piggyback and ask them questions and try to gain knowledge from them. I mean, I think Peyton Manning and you're seeing Philip Rivers. How cool would it be to be a high school kid at Philip Rivers School? Can you imagine the knowledge? If you were a wide receiver, a tight end, an offensive lineman, a freaking quarterback, and he's giving you pointers. He's like, this is what we used to do against Bill Belichick. He's like, when we would play the Steelers, this is how we'd block it. He's like, when we were going up against Darrelle Revis, this is how we would break this route off. It's like, what? How cool is that? So I hope more and more of these players get involved because when you play in the league for a decade plus and play for multiple teams, the knowledge you gain from different coaches, the things you see, the knowledge you gain from watching different players, from film study to being around them to training with them to training camps, uh, deserves to give back to the younger generation. And I think the more and more of these guys kind of jumping on this, the better.